Hare Om Namah. Welcome to the first edition of KCD's question and answer session, which will be a monthly question and answer. This is the first one. It's being posted on January 1st of the first year that we're presenting this question and answer. We have 8 devotees who are asking the questions in a certain order, and most of them are members of the Vaishnava Foundation. 2 of them are, you could say, allies, strong affiliates of the Vaishnava Foundation. Maybe they'll become members in the future. So each of them will ask a question in order, and then I shall give the answer, and then I shall move on to the next devotee and his question. So, Bhakti Ernest, start us off with your first question for this month.
Yes. So, in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.6.34 purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Sri Govinda, who pleasingly accepts the loving transcendental service of his devotees, gives all protection to the words and action of his devotees. And then later, the devotees are especially protected by the Lord so that they may remain infallible. So my question is, on which level one becomes infallible?
The simple answer to this question is the Uttama Adhikari platform, because the Uttama Adhikari devotee is free from mistakes, illusion. He's also free from the cheating propensity, and his senses work perfectly. Now, exactly what that means can only be understood when you reach the stage of Uttama Adhikari, which is very rare. Bahunan Jamanamante Jnanavang Mang Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadurlabha. But even that stage of Uttama Adhikari is Paramatma realization. Uttama Adhikari starts before that. Now, the question and answer session here is going out on the internet, and it's made publicly available to everyone who wants to listen to it, who is listening to it right now. And that's going to include some non-devotees. It's going to include some devotees who have not performed much tapasya whatsoever. It's going to include devotees who don't have much faith, but they have very soft faith, but they're barely devotees. And it's going to include offenders. So because of that, not that many of the devotees listening are not in any of those categories. They're completely beyond both those categories. They're genuine transcendentalists. But we cannot give out confidential information. According to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 67, Krishna says you can't give out confidential information like that to those who have these disqualifications. As such, this answer, to make it more specific, would require giving out confidential information. Confidential knowledge, actually, not information. Information regards facts. Confidential knowledge regards tattva or truth or principles. So the point of the matter here is very simple. Uttama Adhikari starts before Paramatma realization. That's really not confidential. That's pretty easy to find that in Prabhupada's books. But the fact is, he states that a pure devotee, and when he's talking about pure devotee, he's talking about an Uttama Adhikari. Pure devotee also starts before Uttama Adhikari. But the fact of the matter is that the devotee who's Uttama Adhikari is completely protected. And his statements are infallible because he has transcended mistakes, illusion, the cheating propensity, and his senses work perfectly, but they work more and more perfectly as he becomes more advanced on the Uttama Adhikari stage. So at a certain point, as an Uttama Adhikari develops all 23 mystic powers, for example. So his senses are working in a very pure way. But Uttama Adhikari starts before that. At any rate, the devotee who's qualified as a Madhyama Adhikari He's also considered a pure devotee, not to the level of an Uttamadhikari, obviously, because it's madhyam. It means middle. Kanishta. Kanishta, ka, K-A, the prefix ka. If you look up ka in the Sanskrit dictionary, it says the little finger, like on your hand, the little finger, it's smaller. On everybody's hand, the little finger is smaller than all the other fingers. So kanishta, he has small faith, soft faith, the kanishta. But even on the kanishta platform, as you're in the higher rung of the kanishta, you have more faith than the person who's just starting and has faith only, but he hasn't even reached sadhu sangha yet. So the point here is that it's the science of Krishna consciousness. And in the science of Krishna consciousness, perfection is reached in various stages of Atmarama, stages of self-satisfaction. And actually, Atmarama starts right from the moment that you actually develop faith that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, it's Vishnu. Anyone who believes that Vishnu is the Parameshvara is considered a devotee. As soon as you actually believe that Vishnu is Parameshvara, you are in the category of devotee. But you start with very soft faith, and you can fall down very easily from that position. Bhakti Vijaya, you have the second question today. What is it?
You have extensively presented the so-called ISKCON as being a Neo-Jata Goswami sect. Do you see it as a Neo-Smarta manifestation too?
Technically, no, because the Smarta Brahmins are in the category of believing that the Smriti is the only source of truth. That's why they're called Smarta. It's a derivative of Smriti. The Vedas are divided into Shruti, Smriti, and Nyaya. Nyaya is logic. That's what the word Nyaya, Sanskrit word Nyaya, means logic. It refers to Vedanta Sutra. The Shruti is the Vedas, and the Smriti is following the Vedic teachings, what may be called remembering the Vedas, and then commentaries on the Vedas. Smriti means memory, so commentary is included in that. So the Smarta Brahmins, they say that the only truth is in the Smriti. But we don't say that. We say Traya Prasthana. We say Traya, three. Three sources of transcendental knowledge, revealed knowledge. Shruti, Smriti, Nyaya. And by Nyaya, you could just replace Nyaya with Vedanta Sutra. So we accept all the genuine commentaries. We accept the direct Vedas. Like the Arya Samaj, they're exactly opposite of the Smarta Brahmins. Exactly opposite. They say the Smriti is not of any avail. They say it's all the Shruti. They reject Smriti and they reject Nyaya. The Smarta Brahmins, they say that just the Smriti, that's all there is. And since they get Brahminical initiation in their Smriti line, they say that they're the only genuine Brahmins because all the other ones are going to what they consider to be false representations of revealed knowledge, Shruti and Nyaya, Vedanta Sutra. Gokulananda, what is your question this month?
Can one become prepared to be a disciple of a guru without having someone more advanced to spiritually guide them first?
It's an excellent question because guru is the noun. Always remember this. Guru is the noun. There's the Vartma Pradarshaka Guru, there's the Shiksha Guru, and the Diksha Guru. These are the three gurus. But the noun is guru, which means the Adhikar, the qualification, is guru. The Vartma Pradarshaka Guru is the first one who shows you the path. The Shiksha Guru gives you instruction, and the Diksha Guru gives you initiation. Can all three be different individuals? Certainly. Can all three be the same individual? Certainly. That was the situation for all the devotees who came to the Krishna consciousness movement, the Hare Krishna movement of Krishna consciousness, the branch of the Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, which His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada founded in the mid-60s in America. So, to say that you contact a guru, a genuine guru now, remember, the noun is guru. You have to have that qualification first before it's determined whether you're Vartma, Pradarshika, Shiksha, or Diksha. So to say you come into contact with a genuine spiritual master, Vaishnav, and then you immediately accept Diksha at that very moment, who does that? Now, the guru can give Diksha immediately if he so chooses, but who does that? In other words, there's going to be a period of instruction. Also, when does the individual come into contact with the line, with the teachings? Just to give myself as an example here, I had just dropped out of junior year college at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, had about $400 left in my pocket, was engaged in all kinds of severe risky behavior to try to, stretch the rubber band to determine how I was going to utilize my life. I was purpose-driven, but I didn't know how I was going to affiliate. I didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness. But then I was at the co-op there on the east side of Madison, working there every Saturday in order to get quality food because it was revealed to me I had to become a vegetarian. So I was step by step taking inner revelations from the Paramatma. And then I saw the poster, and there's going to be that love feast the next day. And the temple, which I didn't know was there, just a house, two-story house, was only 2 blocks away from where I lived with the other hippies that I was living with on the second floor at Ingersoll Avenue. So I went to Livingston Street, 2 blocks away. And when I knocked on the door and saw Rudra Das walk in the hall, coming to open the door for me, I immediately knew this is it. Immediately I knew. Now, was Rudra my Vartma Pradarshika guru? He gave the lecture that night, and I already knew 3/4 of what he said, but 1/4 I didn't know at all. Because you can't get certain knowledge without hearing it. You have to hear it. You have to contact the devotee and hear it. So, some of the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, in the sense of the transcendental knowledge that's not directly related to Krishna per se, but that is transcendental, yes, you can get that separately. But you can't get the knowledge directly of Krishna consciousness, that Vishnu is the Parameshvara. You can't get that without hearing it. So the question here is that, was Rudradas my Vartma Pradarshika guru? Negative. I had great respect for him at that time. I have great respect for him now. But he was not my Vartma Pradarshika guru. My Vartma Pradarshika guru was His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, who I had contacted previously in the appendices of Baba Ram Das's Be Here Now book. I had contacted him in November of 1971. He was the only guru in those appendices that I was attracted to. In fact, I memorized his name, which was tough to do because I really didn't know Sanskrit at all. And I really didn't have much inclination towards Eastern teachings, frankly. But I was very attracted to that guru. I memorized his name, and I had no idea that he was the guru who was behind the movement I went to that night at Livingston Street that was advertised in the poster at the East Side Co-op at Madison. But my Vartma Pradarshika guru, as every other devotee who came to the Krishna consciousness movement, was His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Because guru is present. Spiritual master. There's a meaning to that word master. You have to be a master. So my answer to your question is that in some extremely rare circumstance, someone who's very advanced in, let's say, Hatha Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga or some of the other yogas that are not Buddha Yoga, and comes in contact with a Vaishnava who's a guru, perhaps that Vaishnava immediately gives Diksha. I would say it would be extremely rare. So on the whole, my answer to you is that no. You first have to come into contact with the guru who shows you the path, which is Vaishnavism, in whatever line. There's 4 lines, technically 4 lines, in actuality 5 lines, because the Gaudiya Sampradaya started just a little before Lord Chaitanya, based off of the Madhva line. So it's a separate line in a sense, because Baladev Vidyabhushana did a separate commentary on Vedanta Sutra. But in the same way, we say Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, which means it's linked to the Madhva line, because the Padma Purana states very specifically that there's 4 lines in Kali Yuga. 4 lines of disciplic succession. And you have to come in contact with a Vartma Pradarshika Guru to show you the line, to show you the way. And then you accept instruction. Maybe it's from the Vartma Pradarshika Guru, maybe it's from a god brother of the Vartma Pradarshika Guru who gives you the instruction, the Shiksha Guru. And then if you qualify, you get initiated. Hasirati, what is your question, your first question this month?
Can living entities be forced to live in this material world forever?
I would not use the participle forced. I think that that's the wrong use of the participle. Remember, the Jiva Tattva has minute independence. What does minute independence mean? It means that it's very limited, but it's important, because the Jiva Tattva is different from the Shakti Tattva. You know, all the manjaris and etc., they're all Shakti Tattva. They cannot fall down. They do not have free will. The Jiva Tattva has free will, but it's limited. And it's limited in one area only. You can choose to serve Lord Krishna or not to serve him. When you choose not to serve him because you must serve him for eternity, then that means you serve his Maya, which is what every conditioned soul is doing here in conditional life. Now, to say that can the living entity be forced to accept conditional life, that would imply that the minute free will is not operative. But it's an eternal, not condition, that would be the wrong word. It's an eternal trait. It's an eternal endowment of the Jiva Tattva. The Jiva Tattva, every Jiva Tattva, and all of us here in the human form of life are Jiva Tattva. We're not Shakti Tattva, and we're not Bhagavat Tattva. We're not Krishna Tattva. We're not Vishnu Tattva. We're Jiva Tattva. The spiritual master is Jiva Tattva. Is there an exception once in a while? For example, Lord Chaitanya is an exception. That he's in the Guru line, our Guru Parampara, but he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, combination of Radha and Krishna. But all the other Gurus listed there, they're Jiva Tattva, including Prabhupada. Now, are they special? Yes, they're very special. First of all, they're all Uttamadhikari. That list at the end of the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, those are the Uttamadhikaris. Those are the Uttamadhikaris. But the fact of the matter is that free will is an eternal endowment of the Jiva Tattva. Therefore, the idea that a Jiva Tattva, that an individual Jiva can be forced to accept conditional life for eternity would mean that he would not have free will ultimately, and that's unacceptable. So my answer to your question is negative. Bhakti Misala, what is your question this month? Your first question.
Yes, Hare Krishna. What is regular guru?
Very good question. So, on May 28th, 1977, at the Krishna Balaram Temple in Vrindavan in India, Prabhupada was in his quarters, and all the GBCs were called for a meeting with him. Now, you know, the regular devotees like myself, we didn't know what Prabhupada looked like. Everything was kept hidden. I mean, if I knew that Prabhupada looked like that, I would have immediately made arrangements to, you know, start collecting money and get over to India. I mean, no human being can look like that and not be on the verge of death. He was skin and bones. You know, he tried to make a trip to the West. He got as far as England, but he was in such bad shape he had to go back. Because why? Because he wanted to leave his quote-unquote physical body, although the spiritual master's physical body works spiritually. He wanted to make sure he was in the Tham. But we didn't know what he looked like. But they knew. Those governing body commissioners knew what he looked like. And they knew that anybody who looked like that was on the verge of checking out. He wasn't eating right. He was hardly eating. So because it looked like he was going to check out, which we're talking May, he checked out in November 14th, 1977, left physical manifestation. That's not that far away, about a half a year. So they all knew that his disappearance could be called imminent. They were called to ask some important questions, which it was totally botched. It is beyond comprehension that when they asked these important questions of Prabhupada, how absurd those two men who asked the questions, how absurdly they asked the questions, and how they interfered with the answers, how they overcoded Prabhupada's answers with their own foolish interpretations. Anyway, it's a long discussion. And it has been covered in a number of videos by me, at least 2 videos I've covered it, and at least 1 article I've covered it. So anybody who's interested in how that breaks down, that conversation there on May 28th, 1977, and the idiots, the 2 idiot sannyasis who conducted it, they were supposed to clarify for all the devotees what to do now and what to do after you are, quote-unquote, no longer with us. 2 questions. But because Satsvarup, one of the guys who asked the question, one of the sannyasis, he said, now we have a question concerning, and he used the singular noun question, then the Ritviks say, oh, it's only 1 question. No, it's clearly 2 questions. Anyone with ABCD intelligence can know it's 2 questions, not 1. So he used question because the questioner called it a question rather than what it should have been called. We now have 2 questions. Oh, but for that reason, therefore, because Prabhupada said Ritvik in the beginning, that means Ritvik also after no longer with us. This is the kind of foolishness that has created all these factions. At any rate, during the answer, Prabhupada actually answered both questions expertly. It's amazing that with all the flack that those 2 sannyasis, TKG and Saintly Suts, were putting up, and how the thing was conducted in such an absurd way, and how there's so much muddle in it by them, how Prabhupada could still perfectly answer both of those questions. Now, at that time, in late May 1977, there had been no initiations for quite some time, many months. The movement was spreading quite well. The fact is, in the mid-70s, the movement took off. Really, it started taking off in 1972. But, you know, the movement really took off in terms of numbers in the mid-70s. So the system was the Ritvik system, namely that the temple presidents, or in some cases the sannyasi that the devotee, uninitiated devotee is working under, he would send a letter to Prabhupada stating that, and he would name the person by bhakta such and such, naming the first and second name, and of course the females were included too. And by the way, as a side note, we're going to be using the masculine gender here when we answer questions. Rather than saying he or she, which will be applicable to many of the answers, we're just going to say he, just for convenience sake. Obviously, the female devotees, they're included in the vast majority of these answers. Where they are not, well, that's going to be irregular. But we're going to use the masculine pronouns for convenience sake only. So the names would be sent to Prabhupada. He never approved all of them, but he approved the vast majority. I do know of at least 1 example where he did not approve a recommendation. But if the president or the sannyasi made a recommendation, then Prabhupada approved and a name was given. Now, there's some exceptions to that in the sense that, for example, when I got initiated, my name was selected the same day I got initiated. Similarly, because Prabhupada at a certain point, starting in 1972, had his sannyasis who were with him as personal secretaries select the names. And then sometimes if he was on the Vyasan, he would change whatever that selected name was. I do know of one situation where he did that. Not mine. My name was selected by his personal secretary at that time, Pradyumna, and Prabhupada accepted the name that Pradyumna had selected for me. But at any rate, to get back to your question, the Ritvik system was in vogue because Prabhupada did not authorize any of his devotees to be Diksha Gurus while he was still physically manifest. He indicated that maybe some of them were qualified to be Diksha Gurus, but that's in the category of encouragement. This is something that you all have to understand. The Guru encourages his disciples, but he's not going to make any compromises, because the Vaishnava system of Buddha Yoga, or if you prefer Bhakti Yoga, is a system of no compromise. It's a perfect system, and there cannot be compromises in a perfect system. There can be adjustments wherever they apply. But in regard to Guru, there cannot be adjustments. Either you're a Guru or you're not. And if you're a Diksha Guru, in our line, you have to receive the order, contrary to what the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation says, contrary to what some of the so-called initiated persons after Prabhupada left say. This is wrong. So in the May 28, 1977, Prabhupada answered, first of all, Ritvik. So he said, I'm going to appoint some Ritviks, which would mean that he was basically saying, I'm going to reestablish what we were doing before. The reason why devotees weren't being initiated was because the Guru has to accept the Sanchita karma when he initiates a devotee. And if the Ritvik is conducting the ceremony, he's not taking that Sanchita karma. He's just pouring the ghee onto the fire and pronouncing a few mantras. He's not the Guru. He's a Ritvik Acharya, not the Acharya, not the Diksha Guru, not the Diksha Acharya. The Diksha Guru is Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was very ill, skin and bones. And this started well before May of 1977. This actually started in the spring of 1976 when Prabhupada was in Hawaii, but that's another long story and a tangent, so we're not going to go into that. The point of the matter is very simple here. Prabhupada reestablished the Ritvik system in answer to the first question, which is what to do while you're still with us. Then the second question, what to do while you're no longer with us, he said, become Guru, regular Guru, that's all. He becomes disciple of my disciple, that's it, but on my order. Everything is contained there. Everything is contained there. First of all, Ritvik is smashed. Ritvik is smashed because Prabhupada says, disciple of my disciple. That smashes Ritvik. Because of Ritvik, he's not the Guru. For example, when this Ritvik concoction started, it immediately broke into factions. How could it not? It's a concoction. It's based on a Sahaja movement. It broke into all kinds of factions. And if any of you are interested in me discussing that, you can ask that question here later on in the queue. But the point of the matter is, disciple of my disciple means that the disciple becomes the Diksha Guru. But he also said regular Guru. What does regular mean? It's an adjective. It means under regulation. It does not mean Uttamaadhikari. It does not mean spontaneous devotee. The spontaneous devotee is not under regulation. But the Madhyamadhikari is, at least in the beginning stages. This is all he authorized. Regular Guru, that's all. He becomes disciple of my disciple, that's it. That's all he authorized, and just as importantly, he didn't name anybody. He didn't officially name any regular Guru. There's no official document. There's no tape. There's nothing to prove that he named a regular guru amongst his disciples, which means it's very possible, if not probable, if not certain, that none of his disciples were qualified Madhyamadikaris at that time. Because why? This discussion of late May of 1977, the previous month in April when Prabhupada returned from Britain, he returned to Bombay first, then he went to Vrindavan. While in Bombay, his personal servant was TKG, and TKG says, we're not qualified to be guru, and Prabhupada says yes. In other words, he affirmed that none of his disciples were qualified to be guru. That's on tape. I've got that. Both I've discussed that in a video, and I've got it in an article too. So, just think how outrageous, how illogical, how incomprehensible and irrational that in April of 1977, Prabhupada says, none of you are qualified to be guru, affirming what TKG told them that they weren't qualified, admitted it, that they're not self-realized. Because you're self-realized when you're a Madhyamadikari. But that, again, requires confidential knowledge, which is not going to be divulged here. The point of the matter is that then from April and then in November and December, they're Uttamadikari? No. 11 men who in April were still Kanishtas, and then they're Uttamas by the end of the year. No. Dr. Andrew, what is your first question today?
Do you agree that the original 11 pretender Mahabhagavats and all subsequent pretender gurus in the so-called ISKCON, by their deeds, are atheists or follow atheism?
Some are atheists. I'm not going to name names. Some are atheists. Why? Because some are Mayavadis. Mayavadi is covert atheism. Buddhism is straight-out atheism. Mayavad is covert atheism because they say God is formless, God is the light, the Brahman, capital B. That is the light of God. That's the effulgence of God. That's the first stage of full realization beyond the Mahatattva. But that is not God in his personal form. That is not the God we worship. We don't worship the impersonal. The Mayavad philosophy, very flawed, but attractive to those who are attracted to it, and Vaishnavas aren't, is that you can worship Radha Krishna, you can worship Sita Narayan, Sita Ram, Lakshmi Narayan. You can worship the form, but that's on the causal plane. And then when you get beyond the causal plane, you worship Mahavishnu, you become Mahavishnu, and then once you transcend that, you merge into Brahman. That's the Mayavad philosophy of spiritual advancement. It is extremely offensive, and it is extremely wrong. Are there covert Mayavadis in the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation? I can assure you that there are. Am I going to name names? That's not my style. When we reach critical mass, maybe my style will change. But for now, I don't name names. I just talk in terms of the general principles. Now, then you may say, well, if they're not all atheists, what are they? Well, first of all, the covert Mayavadis are certainly atheists. The heavy-duty materialists, and there are some, they're not Mayavadis, just straight-out materialists because, you know, you work your way up through the lattice work of the bureaucracy of the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation. Life can be very good for you, materially speaking. Yeah, they're atheists too, because a materialist is by definition atheist. If you're a theist, you're a transcendentalist. At least you accept that the theism is transcendental. How can there be God on the material plane, that God is governed by material energy? That's complete hogwash. So, the materialists and the covert Mayavadis that have penetrated into the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, yes, atheists. Mostly covert, of course. I mean, you go overt atheism, you're going to get kicked out. That's not going to be allowed. That's going too far. But then if you say, well, what about those who are not covert Mayavadis and materialists, dedicated materialists? Well, they come in three different categories. One category is neophyte. Now, personally, do I think there's a lot of Kanishta Adhikaris in the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation? Personally, I think there's very few, because it's very tough to be a Kanishta in that organization. You have to make so many compromises. There's so much nescience in that organization that it's tough to remain on the Kanishta platform. I mean, you can remain on it by struggling and having faith that Lord Krishna is the Parameshvara and have the sentiment that somehow or other it'll all work out, which it won't. It won't work out. Fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, you cannot have 11 pretender Mahabhagavats divide up the world after the founder Acharya leaves into 11 zones and take worship from their god brothers and god sisters as Uttamadhikaris, and then the whole thing collapses and think you can make a comeback from that. That's a death blow. Remember what Prabhupada says. You have to pass the fruit carefully down from the top of the tree to the next, pass the fruit down carefully, perfectly, until it reaches the disciple. They didn't pass anything down perfectly. It was a smash and grab. So to remain a Kanishta, tough. Possible, but tough. Mixed devotee? Oh, yeah. Plenty of Mishra Bhaktas in the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation. Lots of them. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Sahajis? Most definitely Sahajis. Oh, lots of Sahajis, too. Not as many as Mishra Bhaktas, but lots of them. Om Purnam, what is your question, your first question this month?
While we know that the so-called ISKCON has turned into a topsy-turvy society once the founder disappeared, has this cult come to such a degree of degradation that the real workers don't and cannot even exist anymore within the walls of so-called ISKCON?
And this right now doesn't sound like a question to me. Do you want to turn it into a question?
Okay. Are there any real workers in the fabricated so-called ISKCON?
It would be very tough for any real worker to still be functioning in the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I can't say that. I'm in no position to say that. But to say that a dedicated worker on a higher rung of Kanishta Adhikari, because if you're a dedicated worker, if you're a Kanishta Adhikari dedicated worker, you're not on a low rung. You're not just have soft faith or just sadhu sangha. You're up there. You may even be an artha nivritti. You may be free from anartha, which is very tough to do in the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation because of the envy. Remember, Kali Yuga in the West means intrigue, treachery, and betrayal. Everywhere there's intrigue, treachery, and betrayal. When a cult deviates and becomes degraded, a bhakti cult especially, intrigue, treachery, and betrayal is all over the place because advancement becomes artificial. It becomes concocted. Who the advanced devotees are, they aren't. And how you become advanced is not the process, because it's a concocted method, because the whole cult is compromised and concocted. as such, if you're dedicated, then what are you dedicated to and who are you dedicated for? You know, people say, oh, you're so extreme. What's extreme about speaking the absolute truth? It's very extreme to say that what went down immediately after Prabhupada left still can keep the thing alive. That's the extreme. To say that 11 great pretenders who are never recognized as Diksha Gurus by Prabhupada, but only recognized as Ritiks, which they converted through subterfuge, through treachery, through intrigue and treachery. They converted that into Diksha Guru, and then they converted Diksha Guru into Mahabhagavat. When Prabhupada said regular Guru, that's all, and never recognized anybody specifically, officially as regular Guru. And then, of course, you know, the seeds needed the soil. So Swami B.R. Sridhar provided the soil, Mat Guru seed, Jagat Guru, Ritvik Acharya, then it becomes as good as Acharya. Just put on the uniform and you become the soldier. Acharyas of the zone, all these things came from Swami B.R. Sridhar. Oh, they lapped it up. To think you can make a comeback from that. That's a death blow. That devastated the movement. Now, let's say there were real workers in there after Prabhupada left. Certainly there was. Absolutely. Let's say there were some Madhyamadikaris after Prabhupada left. Yeah, I would say it's very possible, perhaps even probable, that there were some Madhyamadikaris in the movement after Prabhupada left physical manifestation. I'll say somewhere between very possible and probable. But after the whole Zonal Acharya hoax was legislated and enforced and implemented, then what? What are those real workers going to do? Who are they going to serve? Now, when I was in the movement, I knew what I was doing. When I was preaching, and I did a lot of preaching. I did a college preaching program. I did preaching at the Sundays to people who came on Sunday. I did Bhagavad classes in the morning, Bhagavad Gita classes in the evening. By nature, I speak. I have some power of communication, just as you're all realizing right now as you're listening to this. I'm preaching right now. But after Prabhupada left, and then after the Zonal Acharya hoax got implemented, before that, when I went out to the colleges, I brought 5 devotees. And now again, I'm not the doer. We're not the doers. But I preached in such a way, I followed my guru in such a way that 5 devotees came from the colleges. Actually, they all 5 came from one college, as it turned out, University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. But they came and they surrendered. They gave up their college careers, if you want to call it a college career, and they got initiated by Prabhupada, all 5 of them. Because that's what I was preaching. Get your initiation. Get your means of production opportunity. Because Prabhupada is so powerful, he's provided temples all over the United States. Here's the closest one. I was working out of Evanston, which is a suburb of Chicago. So they all came to Evanston, which is fine, which is what I was hoping they would do. And it took time. But at any rate, I'm just using this as an example. I was bringing them to Prabhupada. I was a real worker. I was not a pet disciple of Prabhupada by any means. I never sent him a letter. I never received a letter from him. I was alone with him once for 4 minutes. That's the total time I was ever alone with him. Now, I was fanning him or playing mridanga or kartals for him on the Vyasan right next to him quite a bit, especially in Honolulu. But I wasn't, one of the top echelon guys. I was perhaps 3rd echelon and very briefly a temple president for about 4 months in an extremely small temple on the big island of Hawaii. But I had a method designed for an outcome. namely preach to bring newcomers to Prabhupada to get initiated and then take advantage of the means of production which was functioning. But after Prabhupada left, when the hoax got implemented, the means of production got twisted. Who are you going to bring them to? You're going to bring them to one of those 11? That's not devotional service. To bring somebody to a bogus guru, to a great pretender, that's not. You can't be a real worker when you do that. Then what's your real work? The opportunities were like almost zero. And then you say, well, go into the kitchen and cook. Well, what is that? Then you cook, and then that what you cooked gets offered on the altar, and the altar is desecrated with all these bogus gurus on it, or at least one of them on it, and then the so-called pujari on the altar is an initiate of that bogus guru. What is that? That's not real work. The opportunities went to zero for the real workers. We had to make our own opportunities after that. So are there any real workers in the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation? It's a doubtful proposition. Dr. Patrick, what is your first question today, this month?
My question would be regarding those devotees who would have taken initiation once or sometimes twice from one of these bogus pretenders. Would a person have made any advancement, even though they were within the institution of Prabhupada?
All right.
Yeah.
The question that Dr. Patrick is asking is that, was any spiritual advancement made if you came to the movement after Prabhupada left physical manifestation and you accepted initiation from a bogus guru? And the answer is A, B, C, D. In other words, we're not fanatics at the Vaishnava Foundation. We're not. We're not extremists, and we're not fanatics. The fanatics are in these cults, the splinter groups, and Ritvik is loaded with factions. Fabricated so-called ISKCON has major divisions also. As far as Neo-Mata is concerned, it's loaded with, wild card gurus. It has no governing body. Its affiliation, their affiliation with one another is simply sentiment and some friendship. Otherwise, they're all doing their own thing. In other words, the whole movement has been broken up all over the place. What appears to be the Hare Krishna movement. It's broken all over the place, including within these cults. If you say Ritvik, well, which Ritvik? Is it the Ritviks that say that Prabhupada's the Diksha Guru for the rest of Kali Yuga? Is it the Ritviks that say he's the Diksha Guru until the next Mahabhagavat? Is it the Ritviks who say that once the initiation, the Ritvik gives the initiation, then that disciple is equal to him, the one who gave the initiation? Is it the prominent guru viewpoint that the Ritvik Acharya and Prabhupada are both gurus, both Diksha gurus for the newcomer? There's all kinds of different theories about Ritvik and how it's applicable after Prabhupada leaves, but the actual fact is Ritvik was defunct as of November 15th, 1977. The Ritvik movement, therefore, is broken into all kinds of factions. Within the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, you have the faction that believes there's such a thing as a Madhyamadikari female Diksha Guru, which is now the legislated position. And then you have the temple presidents and sannyasis in India who are part of the fabricated so-called ISKCON, along with that big-time sannyasi there in Europe, who say, no, the whole thing is bogus, even though governing body commission has approved it. So that's one major division. There's other divisions in the fabricated so-called ISKCON besides that one, although right now that one's the paramount division. And then as far as Neo-Mata, they're all divided. They all do their own thing, and they don't care about it. They have their, Vaishnava, World Vaishnava Association meets once a year there in Mathura. What is that? That's all backslapping. The point of the matter is that the Vaishnava Foundation is the organization small at this time. Eventually that may not be the case, but small at this time. We're not the extremists. We're not fanatics. We speak the truth. We speak according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. We speak the facts. We give you the facts, we give you the knowledge, we give you the tattva, and we avoid historical revisionism, whereas all these other cults and all these other factions are loaded with historical revisionism. We tell you as it is, what went down, why it went down, and how it played out, and how it's playing out. We give it to you as it is, and as you as pure spirit soul like it. And because we're not fanatics, we don't say you don't make any advancement if you go to the fabricated so-called ISKCON. We don't say that. If we said that, we'd be fanatics. You make A, B, C, D. If you have no knowledge of Krishna consciousness and you join the organization, you will get A, B, C, D knowledge. You will make some spiritual advancement due to A, B, C, D knowledge. You will learn some truths. You will get some sadhana that you can apply. You will get beads. You will get a bead bag. You will make some advancement in spiritual life. And then once you reach a little bit deeper into the alphabet, you will be misled. Once you reach G, H, I, Guru, honesty, initiation, G, H, I, at that point you get led into Maya. But A, B, C, D, no. You get something. You get something of value. Now, the question he asked could be said to be twofold, because he asked, what about those who get initiated and then reinitiated? Why did they accept that initiation? That's the first question. In other words, genuine guru meets genuine disciple when both criteria are met. If you accept initiation from a bogus guru, that means you didn't have the criterion of being a bona fide disciple. Something was wrong there. Now, those who blame that on the institution, they're not entirely wrong. But then again, our system is not institutionalized. The institution serves the person. You do not become initiated by a so-called spiritual institution. The institution is the form. The guru is the actor who takes advantage of the form. The institution provides the means of production, but the guru provides the genuine connection. If you are actually going to make spiritual advancement, you have the right attitude. And if you have the right attitude, after you get the A, B, C, D from the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, which is all you could get post-1977, you could only get A, B, C, D, and then after that, you're in trouble. If you're sincere and serious, you recognize that. I was a very intense devotee. Everybody that knew me knew I was a very intense devotee. Many devotees didn't like it. Some liked it, most didn't. But that's why I knew everything was going off the rails by the mid-70s. Because I could see, because I was intense and serious and sincere, I could see that everything was going off the rails. It was revealed to me, both internally and externally. Similarly, those newcomers who come and accept one or two bogus initiations, that's on them. You see, that's the ultimate trump card of the leaders of the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation. And let me tell you, they play it ruthlessly. They play that trump card. Because ultimately they say, oh, you realize now you got cheated? Well, that's on you. Why did you get cheated? You wanted to be cheated. So we cheated you. When I was with a leader, one of the leaders of the well, he was the leader of ISKCON when it was still bona fide, and then after it wasn't, he stuck with it for a while, for quite a few years, frankly. So I met him at what was called the Seven Mothers Restaurant in Berkeley, California, in 1981, and we were sitting together eating a meal, and one other devotee was with me, but mostly it was myself and him who were talking. And so I started pointing out, because I was making propaganda against what they were all doing, and it was starting to cause some disruption. So he was trying to, like, you know, come back to us now, stop disrupting things. So, you know, I was talking to him on this subject, and then he said to me, somebody has to cheat them. That's exact quote, word for word. Somebody has to cheat them. So the point of the matter is that for those devotees who got one initiation and then got a so-called reinitiation, the fact is reinitiation is inapplicable, because for reinitiation to be applicable, you first have to get a bona fide initiation, and then your regular guru has to fall down. But there were no gurus who gave first bona fide initiation, so the reinitiation is not applicable. All right, how many minutes have we used up, Dr. Ernest?
Yeah, it is 1 hour 3 minutes.
So that'll be it. That'll be it for today. And then whatever questions you all have in stock, you can carry those over to next month. Until the next time, Hare Krishna.